Okay. So, when we were discussing under the section 23 of the Indian Contract Act, and under section 23, we have discussed like what are the provision that makes the object and consideration and as lawful, and what are the things that makes the object and consideration as unlawful. Okay. So about this legality of the contract, we have already discussed. There are certain kind of the concept which makes the object and consideration of the contract as lawful, and certain conditions are there which makes the contract as unlawful in nature. Okay. So when we are discussing under section 23 of the Indian Contract Act, we have already discussed what considerations and objects are lawful and what are not. So what are the objects and considerations that makes the contract lawful, and what objects and considerations are unlawful in nature? So these things we are discussing under the Indian Contract Act itself. Okay. So under section 23, we have discussed the consideration and objects are lawful when it is legally authorized or valid to be conducted. Okay. But when there are certain circumstances when we see that certain agreement or the nature of the agreement or the nature of the contract is legally prohibited or legally restricted, then the contract becomes unlawful by its nature. That means when any kind of the consideration or object is forbidden by law means that is restricted or prohibited by the court of law. And the second condition is when it is of such a nature that, if permitted, it would defeat the provisions of the law or it is fraudulent in nature. In the last class, I have already explained you and we have already discussed certain points regarding that. When we're talking about any kind of the contract or agreement, for example, I am making an agreement with you regarding the selling of a land or selling of my certain property, that is valid in nature until and unless I am legally authorized to sell you that certain agreement. When I have the legal identity or legal capacity to sell you that particular document or that particular instrument, in that condition, my contract with you or my agreement with you becomes a valid agreement. But the point when it comes that the agreement is forbidden by the law or restricted by the court of law, then at that point of time, that agreement becomes as an unlawful agreement or it becomes illegal by nature. For example, we have also discussed in the last class, मान लीजिए there are certain agreement about the contractual agreement regarding the transaction of any certain kind of drugs which is strongly prohibited in India. For example, there is the talk, let's take about the ganja and other things, the things which are just harmful to the society, harmful to the human being, and harmful to the people. Okay, so these selling and buying of these things are totally illogical and unethical in nature, and that is not accepted by the court of law. Okay, but the question arises, if there is any kind of the circumstances, if there is any kind of the situations when the court sees or when the authorities see that you are doing the buying or selling of those particular instruments which is prohibited by the law, then of course it is no doubtly we can say that the contract becomes void or voidable by its nature. Okay. And we have also discussed that when it involves or implies injury to the person or property of another, when I am doing a contract with you or I am negotiating a contract with you regarding to harm upon a particular substance or a property of someone. For example, I am paying you 10,000 rupees, and in return of that consideration of that rupees, I am asking you go and kill that person, go and go and do any kind of harm to that person. For example, you are my enemy and I am just paying another person 1 lakh rupees to kill you, or I am paying another person to burn your house. to make harm to your child or to your wife, to kidnap you. So certain kind of agreements or certain kind of considerations which has been given to a particular person or a particular property for certain kind of things which is illegal or authentic or non-authentic in nature, in that case, that kind of agreement is called as a void agreement in nature. Okay. Yeah. So, under section 23, we have also read another things. When the court regards the certain kind of contract is opposed to the public policy. That means when the court finds that certain kind of the agreement or contract is opposed to the public policy or opposed to the uh, public benefit, then that kind of contract can be considered as void in nature. Okay. So in under section 23, we have discussed about certain conditions of the contract under which the contract or the contract can be declared as the void or voidable in nature due to the unlawful nature of the consideration and objects. Okay. So what are those conditions? If the object and the consideration is forbidden by law, that means prohibited by law. Second condition, if it is of such a nature that if permitted, it would defeat the provisions of the law or it is fraudulent in nature. Okay. The third condition, it involves or implies injury to the person or property of the another. It involves or imply to the injury of the injury to the person or injury to the property of another person. Then the court regards it as immoral or opposed to the public policy when the court considers that the nature of the contract is immoral and opposed to the public policy. So in each of these cases, the consideration or object of an agreement is said to be unlawful or illegal in nature. And every agreement of which the object or consideration is unlawful is void in nature. Okay. So let's come to the point of section 24. It speaks about the agreement is void if consideration and objects are unlawful in part. So what does it speak? It speaks that the agreement is void if the consideration and the object is unlawful on its part. Okay. So how does it been defined? If any part of a single consideration for one or more objects or any one or any part of any one of several considerations for a single object is unlawful, the agreement is void. That means there are two things has been defined over here. The first thing is single consideration for one or more objects and single object there are more than one considerations. In those conditions, if any of the nature of the contract is void in nature, any of the object or consideration is void in nature, then the whole contract can be void ab initio or can be void in nature. So just how does it been defined? There are two things has been told over here. For one object, multiple considerations. And the second condition is for one consideration, there are the multiple objects. So in these both conditions, the agreement can be void if any one of these, like either the object or the consideration, any one of these is void in nature or unlawful in nature. Clear? Then coming to the next part, under section 25, it speaks agreement without consideration void unless it is in writing and registered or is a promise to compensate for something done or is a promise to pay debt barred by the limitation law. So what does it mean? Usually when we are talking about the contract or the agreement, we know that in certain kind of the contracts, what usually happens, there should be the consideration for each and every contract. That means if I am doing a contract with you, I should be paid certain kind of consideration for my particular performance or for my specific performance of the contract. Okay, got it? So here when we are talking about the agreement without consideration is void, we have already read it. That means whenever the contract is being getting done, whenever any kind of contract is being getting done, in return of that contract, there should be certain kind of consideration to be given for that specific performance of the contract. That means for every kind of the agreement, there should be the presence of certain kind of the consideration. If I am buying a biscuit from you, in return, I am liable. It is mandatory for me to pay you 10 rupees or 20 rupees, which is the cost of the biscuit. Yes. In the same condition, for example, if I am buying a land for you, I am liable. It is mandatory for me to pay you the amount or the money that is the in exchange of the land. If I am buying a home from you, if the cost of the home is 5 lakh, okay, so in return, I have to pay you that particular amount of the 5 lakh. So moreover, it can be said that whenever we are doing any kind of the agreement or contract, that should be valid in nature until and unless you are not paying the proper amount of consideration for that specific performance of the contract. When any kind of the agreement or contract is being performed, in return there should be the performance of the specific amount of the consideration. Without the proper consideration, the contract is called as the void contract or the illegal contract. Okay. So coming to this part, when we are talking about section 25, it is told that agreement without consideration is void. Okay. Agreement without the consideration is void unless it is in writing and registered or is promised to compensate for something done or promised to pay debt by the limitation law. The without consideration, the contract will be called as a valid contract. When? Under what conditions the contract can be called as the valid contract, even if there is the absence of the consideration over here. The first condition is when there is the it is obligatory in nature. For example, my father is giving me his half of the property. So here I am his own daughter. Okay. So there is a family relation, family bonding between my father and me. And out of love and affection, he is paying me something. He is giving me his land. He is giving me his home. He is giving me his half of the property. So all these things which is happening out of love and affection, there is no need to be presence of any kind of the consideration. And that agreement, even if without consideration, is void in nature. Okay. Then the second condition, what does it say? When there is the something done previously and there is the promise of the payment. Okay. So how does it means something done previously? That means, for example, मान लीजिए there is a condition when you were highly sick and you were bedridden. Okay. At that point of time, I have come to your house and I have served you. I have taken care of you for 6 to 7 months. Okay. I have done everything for you. खाना बनाना आपको, आपका ख्याल रखना, आपके लिए मेडिसिन लाना, आपका प्रॉपर केयर करना. So I did all this kind of things. So when you were sick during the period I was staying in your home. Okay. So those 6 months when I have served you and then you got well. After getting better, you realize that yes, this girl has done so much for me. Now this is time for me to give something return to that girl, and that is why what that person is doing. That person is paying me 15,000 rupees or 50,000 rupees in return, that or else that person, what he or she is doing, he is having multiple lands, multiple properties, and he thought that कि अरे तुमने मेरे लिए इतना कुछ किए हो, सो एक काम करो, मैंने ये वाला जो हमारा घर का जो भी लैंड है, तो मैं ये आपका नाम पे कर देती हूँ, यू जस्ट टेक दिस प्रॉपर्टी एंड दिस इज योर कंपेंसेशन फ्रॉम माय साइड. ओके, सो दिस इज द, देयर इज द प्रेजेंस ऑफ द मिक्स्ड इमोशन ओवर हियर. यहाँ पे मैं उनके लिए जो 5-6 महीना काम किया हूँ, लाइक आई हैव वर्क फॉर दिस पर्सन, आई हैव टेकन केयर ऑफ दिस पर्सन, आई हैव सर्व दैट पर्सन फॉर 5-6 months, एंड इन रिटर्न दैट पर्सन हैज नॉट गिवन मी एनीथिंग. आउट ऑफ लव मैंने उनका सेवा किया है, उनको लगा कि उसके बदले में उनको कुछ उसने मेरे को कुछ देना जरूरी है, इसलिए वो क्या किए, अपना एक घर मेरे नाम पे कर दिए. So here, this kind of transaction, there is not any presence of the any consideration. जब मैंने उनका 6 महीने से उनका सेवा कर रही थी, तभी मेरे को उनसे कोई भी consideration का amount नहीं मिला. I have not got any kind of money from him. And when that person is transacting or transferring his land or property to me, a particular part of the property, when that person is transferring to me, then of course it is pretty clear, it is pretty sure that I am not paying him any more money in return of that land. Obviously not. But here the point is, I am not paying him back for that particular land, but I have been got that property or that land in return of my service to him. मैंने उनके लिए जो भी सेवा की हूँ, उसी के बदले ही ये मेरे को मिल रहा है. So this is out of the love and compassion, or out of something which we can call as the compensation for someone or something done, or there is a promise to pay. Okay, and then the last thing, debt barred by the imitation law. Okay, for example, I have taken 5 crores of the rupees from someone. मैंने किसी से 5 करोड़ पैसा, 5 करोड़ का amount मतलब लिया है as the debt. Okay, I have taken a loan from someone, debt as a debt, मैंने किसी से पैसा लिया है. So in return, जब मैं वो पैसे को नहीं चुका पा रही हूँ, what I am doing, I am just trying to compensate that person कि चलो मेरे पास तो पैसा नहीं है, मैं आपको पैसा वापस नहीं कर पा रही हूँ, बट इन रिटर्न आई एम सेलिंग यू माई वन ऑफ द लैंड. मैं अपना एक जमीन जो है, जिसी का कॉस्ट अराउंड 2-3 करोड़ का है, मैं वो जमीन आपके नाम पे कर देती हूँ. So here, this kind of transaction out of the debt, जहाँ पे मैं आपके पास already ऋणी हूँ, there is the debt from my side upon you, जहाँ पे मेरे को आपको कोई डेट पे करना होता है, बट मैं वो डेट पे नहीं कर पा रही हूँ, एंड इन रिटर्न आई एम गिविंग यू सर्टन काइंड ऑफ द ट्रांजेक्शंस. मेरा कोई घर, कोई जमीन मैं आपके नाम पे कर रही हूँ. इन दिस केसेस ऑल्सो द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट इज कॉल्ड एज ए वैलिड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, इवन इफ देर इज द लैक ऑफ द कंसिडरेशन, देर इज द एब्सेंस ऑफ द कंसिडरेशन और द ऑब्जेक्ट ओवर हियर. ओके, अंडर सेक्शन 25 there is the condition where it is said that, yeah, under clause I, under clause 1 of section 24, it is said that it is expressed in writing and registered under the law for the time being in force and for the registration of documents, and is made on account of natural love and affection between the parties standing in near relation to each other. When? What does it mean? An agreement is made without the consideration is void. When an agreement is made without any kind of the consideration, that agreement is void at what certain conditions. So what are those conditions? The first condition is when it is expressed in writing and registered under the law for the time being in force for the registration of documents, and is made on account of natural love and affection between the parties standing in real relation to each other. When the parties are standing in near relation to each other, that means the parties are just quite close relative to each other. For example, we can talk about the blood relation, or we can certainly talk about the certain other kind of the relations except the blood relation. For example, I am having a person who is for example, I am attending my old age. Okay, my son and daughter, they are staying outside India, or they are staying outside this country. Okay, so what happening that I am being alone at my home and there is no one to take care of me, but there is a person who is coming and staying in my house, who is taking care of me, who is giving me the proper attention, care, and understanding me properly. So that person is also comes under the logic of the near relation of mine. Even though that person is not related to my blood relative, that person is not related to my personal one, but that person becomes my personal ones by his activities. So that person will be considered as my near relation itself. All right. So what does it speak? It is expressed in writing and registered under the law for time being in force for the registration of documents. The agreement between the parties that must be in the written and registered in the pen and paper. If I am or certain kind of house, certain kind of property to my son or daughter, then I need to do that kind of the legal agreement. The nature of the agreement, the nature of the contract must be in written and registered in nature. All right. So what does it mean? It is expressed in writing and registered under the law for the time being in force for the registration of documents. That means for the registration of the documents, the nature of the agreement that should be lawful in nature, that should be done out of love and affection, and most importantly, the document must be expressed in writing and registered under the law. The document must be written in nature, must be registered by the court of law. All right. And affection between the parties standing in near relation to each other, the parties between whom this contract is being signed or this agreement is being done, the property to whom the person to whom the property is being transferred, that person must be the near relation of the another person. There must be certain kind of bond in between both of them, and that is why one person must transfer its property to another person out of the natural love and affection. Okay. The second condition, it is a promise to compensate. It is a promise to compensate wholly or in part. A person who has already voluntarily done something for the promisor, or something which the promisor was legally compliant to do. Okay. What does it mean? It is a promise to compensate wholly or in part a person who has already voluntarily done something for a promisor, or something which the promisor was legally compellable to do. Okay. That means, for example, there it can be understood by a certain example only. Um, there is a person who is working as your servant. Okay, that person is working as your servant, and that person is taking care of your house, your property, and everything. So what happens that you have to travel outside India or abroad for a specific period of 2 years. 2 साल के लिए आपको यहाँ से बाहर जाना पड़ेगा. The whole family is shifting. Okay. So what happens? That person who was your servant, that person becomes little old. Okay. So the person is a very trustworthy person from your family. That person is taking care of your property and everything. So when you are shifting to another country, that time you are asking this old man or your servant that would you like to take care of our property further? हमारा ये जो घर है हम इसी को छोड़ के बाहर जाइए जा रहे हैं, तो अभी आपका ये रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि आपने ये घर अच्छी तरह से संभालो, इसका देखरेख करो, इस घर में मतलब सही तरीके से उसी का देखभाल करना, उसी का प्रॉपर केयर लेना, सारी चीज तुम अपने यहाँ से करो. ओके, सो being agreed, and in return what is the promise? If you are taking proper care of this house for the next 2 years, then I am going to pay you this much amount of the money. अब 2 साल तक इस घर का ख्याल रखो, 2 साल के बाद मैं आपको इतना पैसा देने वाली हूँ. And after this I am living outside, I am going abroad. Okay, so what happens during the period of my absence in this house? घर में जितना दिन I was absent, I was not present in that particular duration in the home, if there is any person who has taken care of me, अगर taken care of my house, taken care of my property, that is my servant only. 2 साल तक उसने अपना वादा रख के घर का प्रॉपर ख्याल रखा. मान लीजिए 2 साल के बाद मैं घर को वापस आ गई, and as per the promise I should pay the certain amount I have promised to my servant. अगर 2 साल तक उसने मेरा प्रॉमिस रख के मेरे को उसने जो प्रॉमिस किया था कि हाँ साहब मैंने आपका घर का पूरा ख्याल रखूंगा एंड आई एम गोइंग टू टेक केयर ऑफ योर हाउस, योर प्रॉपर्टी, 2 साल तक उसने सही तरीके से सब कुछ संभाल के ही तो रखा है. So in return, the person must be compensated something, because 2 साल तक उसने घर में जो कुछ भी काम किया है, उसका टाइम दिया है, उसका जितना भी मेहनत दिया है, the person must be compensated for that. Okay, the compensation is of two types, compensation wholly और compensation partially. मान लीजिए मैंने उसको बोला कि फॉर द टेकिंग केयर ऑफ माई हाउस आई एम गोइंग टू पे यू 30,000 रुपीज पर मंथ. ओके, सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल मान लीजिए आई एम गोइंग टू पे दैट पर्सन 5 लाख ऑफ द रुपीज आफ्टर 2 years, 5 लाख रुपए आफ्टर 2 years देने वाला हूँ. तो पहले मैंने क्या किया, यहाँ से जाने से पहले मैंने उनका हाथ में 2 लाख रुपए रख दिया और उनको बोला कि आप घर का अच्छी तरह से ख्याल रखो. आफ्टर 2 years when I am coming back, I am going to pay you rest 3 lakh of the rupees. Okay, got it? So when this kind of the circumstances are coming in front now, then it is clearly said that the promise to compensate the particular amount must need to be fulfilled. If I am promising someone for certain kind of activity, मेरा सर्वेंट ने मेरा घर का ख्याल रखा, मैं जब बीमार थी उसने मेरा सेवा की, तो यहाँ पे अगर एक इंसान ने वॉलंटरीली अपने खुशी से मेरे लिए कुछ किया है, तो इन रिटर्न if I am paying that person certain amount of the money or certain amount of the compensation, then this and that is of the out of love and affection, then this kind of the gift or compensation even without the consideration is valid in nature. यहाँ पे अगर मैं जिनके साथ रह के उनका 6 महीना सेवा कर चुकी हूँ, and in return if that person is paying me 10,000 of the rupees, 15,000 of the rupees, or giving me a part of his land to me, so this kind of the agreement, यहाँ पे उन्होंने अपना जो प्रॉपर्टी जो जमीन मेरे नाम पे कर रहे हैं, is that unauthentic in nature? The answer is no, that is completely authentic, क्योंकि मैंने पहले से उनका सेवा की हूँ. तो out of love and care or love and affection, that person is gifting me something. Here the same mind, he is a old person. उन्होंने जो 2 साल में मेरी घर पे नहीं थी, उन्होंने मेरा घर का सारा ख्याल रखा, घर को संभाला, घर को सही सलामत रखा है. So after 2 years, Hayan, I am coming out. I am seeing that yes, that person has taken proper care of my house. In return, I am paying that person 5 लाख of the rupees. 5 लाख रुपए का पैसा मैं उनको दे रहा हूँ. और इस पैसा का बात छोड़ लीजिए, मेरा दूसरा जगह पे एक घर है. आई एम गिविंग दैट होम टू हिम. मैं वो घर या वो मतलब वो फ्लैट उनके नाम पे कर दे रही हूँ कि आप ये फ्लैट ले लीजिए. दिस इज योर्स from now on. So these kind of the activities, even though there is the absence of the consideration over here, अगर मैं अपना घर या मेरा फ्लैट उनके नाम पे कर रही हूँ, then there is not presence of any consideration amount. वहां पे उस घर या जमीन के बदले उन्होंने मुझे कुछ पैसा वापस नहीं देने वाले हैं. That person is not going to pay you any kind of the money, a single penny in return of that particular gift. लाइक मैंने उनको कोई घर गिफ्ट कर लिया, कोई जमीन गिफ्ट कर लिया, इन रिटर्न ऑफ हिज सर्विस, वॉलंटरी सर्विस में खुशी में वो चीज दिया है. सो हियर दैट पर्सन इज नॉट पेइंग मी एनीथिंग अबाउट द कंसिडरेशन अमाउंट फॉर दैट स्पेसिफिक प्रॉपर्टी. So here, even though there is the absence of the consideration amount over here, the contract or the agreement is already considered as a voluntary agreement because there is the voluntary activity and the compensation amount is out of love and affection. Clear? Then the number 3, it speaks that it is a promise made in writing and signed by the person or by his legal agent, specially authorized on their behalf to pay wholly or in part a debt which the creditor might have enforced payment but law of the limitation of the stops. For example, you have taken the debt of 5 lakh rupees from me, and in return, I am unable to pay you that particular amount in cash. So what I am doing, I am giving you और सेलिंग यू वन ऑफ माई प्रॉपर्टी फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट. मेरा एक दूसरा जगह पे जमीन है जिसका वैल्यू है 2 करोड़ या 3 करोड़. मैं क्या कर रही हूँ, मैंने बोला कि देखिए मैं आपसे 3-4 करोड़ का पैसा लाई थी एंड आई एम अनेबल टू पे दैट मनी एंड इन रिटर्न ऑफ दैट मनी आई एम गिविंग यू दैट पर्टिकुलर लैंड. सो यहाँ पे when you are taking the ownership of that particular land from me, in that place you are not giving me any kind of the consideration in back, but here what you are giving me, that is the bond between you and me is a good bond, जहां पे आपने मेरे को पहले से पैसा दिए थे and to compensate that debt, to give you that debt back in exchange of the money I am giving you my certain kind of the land as a gift, जहां पे मैं आपसे कोई भी पैसा नहीं ले रही हूँ and the intention of mine to give you that particular land or that property is to compensate the debt. That is why this kind of contract is also valid in nature and not void in nature. Okay. So this is about section 25 of the Indian Contract Act. Under section 26 of the Indian Contract Act, it speaks that agreement in restraint of the trade is void and agreement in restraint of the marriage is also void in nature. That means if you are doing any kind of the agreement in restraint of the marriage, that means I am doing an agreement with you that I am going to pay you 10 lakh of the rupees if you are not getting married for rest of your life. So here this kind of the agreement are totally void in nature because marriage is the basic right of the everyone. This is the genuine culture, this is the genuine tradition of our Hindus, right? So when someone is restricting me that don't get married to that person or this person or for the lifetime purpose and in return I am going to pay you this much rupees or that much rupees, then in that case those kind of agreement which is done in restraint of the marriage, which is restraining the marriage, is void in nature. Got it? Similarly, agreement in restraint of the trade is void under section 27 of the Indian Contract Act. That means If there is any kind of the trade activities, any kind of the business I am pursuing at any part of the India, and I have been restricted to do that kind of business in India, and in return I am asked to pay certain amount or get certain kind of the compensation in nature, in those conditions that agreement is completely void in nature. I am a businessman. I am pursuing my business in all over the India. But if there is a person from Delhi is coming to me and restraining me that your business should not be there in Delhi. If you are taking your business away from Delhi, then I am going to pay you this much rupees. So you can do your business in any other part of the India, but don't do your business in the part of the Delhi, because that is my region. Okay. So in this condition, when you are restricting me to continue certain kind of the trade agreement, to continue certain kind of the business in specific part of the country which should not be restricted, those agreement or that kind of the agreement in restraint of the trade is void in nature. So that is why it has been told that agreement in restraint of the trade is void in nature when it is restrained from exercising any kind of the lawful trade or business of any kind. When there is the business of the lawful business, lawful trade, or lawful consideration is present, and when the person who is the seller or buyer or carrying a specific business, and you are restricting or prohibiting that person from continuing that business or from continuation of that particular trade, in that condition that kind of agreement or that kind of contract is void in nature, because this is the pure restrictions upon particular person's freedom. We have already understood about the right to life and personal liberty. We have already understood about the right to freedom. Under Article 14, when we are talking about the right to freedom of the freedom as the fundamental right. Okay, sorry, right to equality under Article 14 and Article 19, we are studying about the freedom of the right of the freedom. Okay, so when we have studied about the fundamental right, we have already understood that under that everyone has the right to continue their trade or business in any part of the India. There is not only not any person can restrict you from carrying any kind of the trade or business until and unless that business or trade is unlawful in nature. Got it? So here, if there is any kind of the agreement to prohibit you from carrying certain kind of business or trade, in that case, that kind of agreement is void in nature. Got it? So this is till section 27 of the Indian Contract Act. From tomorrow onwards, we are going to continue from section 28 itself. This is all for today. See you in the next class. Thank you so much.